The topic of our video is violence in sport. In the video, we will explore how religious athletes have justified violence in their sport while maintaining a relationship with God. We will begin by looking at the history of violence in sport and how it has or has not changed in today's sporting world. But before we look at this, we need to define what is violence.
According to the Oxford Dictionary, violence is behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. The violent acts committed in sport cannot be looped into this definition, and we must acknowledge that violence in sport is not the intent to hurt, damage, or kill, but rather going above the level of contact that is usually expected during sport. When we have a question about the Christian faith, we turn to the Bible for answers. So, what does the Bible say about violence, specifically related to sport? Nothing. It does not say that violence is allowed, but it also does not say at any point that it is not. The way that Christians interpret passages that relate to violence is with the mindset of the all-important saying, "What would Jesus do?" Even though the Bible does not explicitly say that violence should not exist in sport, the Bible does tell us, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." To most, violent hits and extreme fighting would not be seen as an act that glorifies God, but there are some people that say it could. This will be something that we will touch on again later in our video.
During the Hellenic period, the man who was nearest to God was one who was strong and powerful. To obtain such titles, men would participate in activities that challenged them physically and usually competed with another individual. This created a greater acceptance of violence in competitions as it would allow one true winner to be crowned. Philostratus II, a teacher in the Greek and Roman empires, taught his students that the most desirable of all is to triumph with the price of one's life. This encouraged the violent nature of competition by suggesting that the most important thing was to win, even if that meant risking your life. During the ancient Olympics, competition was used to establish a relationship with God, as well as train for battle and survival. A man would partake in brutality to fashion his immortality, which would in turn make him more divine. In the Middle Ages, Christianity reproached the participation of knights and nobles in these games due to the tournaments not having a real purpose other than the pursuit of vain glory and unnecessary violence. To Christians of this time, this pursuit of glory caused individuals to neglect their real duties that were imposed on them by God and focus on a win-at-all-costs attitude. Even though it is no longer socially acceptable to battle to the physical death of an opponent in today's sporting world, we can still see this win-at-all-costs mentality in sport. We can see different forms of violence across multiple sports all around the world. What is the first sport you think of when you think of violence? Is it fighting in hockey, tackling in football, rugby, water polo, kicking in soccer, or the more obvious MMA, boxing, or wrestling? These are some of the world's most popular sports, and even though they are played in different countries by different races and people of a variety of different socio-economic backgrounds, they all have one thing in common: violence. And with just over 30% of the world's population following in the Christian faith, there is bound to be athletes who participate in these sports while practicing their faith. As you would guess, many Christian values are challenged in these modern sports as well, but we see today that lots of athletes still maintain some kind of relationship with God, even if it was not an easy journey to get there.
That was the case for NHL player Mike Fisher. His battle for balance between sport and religion, it was something that was not easy at the start, but has finally come to peace. Fisher grew up in a Christian home that held to many traditional values. He was drafted by his first minor league team at only 18 years old, and when he left home, he left many of his religious traditions with him. A short 1 year later, Fisher found himself drafted 44th overall to the Ottawa Senators. When he began playing for the team in the 99-2000 season, Fisher immediately became known for his aggressive style of play. After acquiring an injury midway through his first season, Fisher began to find his way back to his faith as a part of his rehabilitation process. During this time, he battled with how he would be able to continue to play such a destructive way while also strengthening his relationship with God. He came to the resolution that as a child of God, we are all gifted in certain areas, and that it is our duty to use these gifts that God has given us for His glory. Fisher has stated that he has grown in his faith and he has learned that it is not about religion but relationship. So long as you build a personal relationship with Jesus, you shall find eternal significance. Even though this may seem like a stretch for some Christians, Mike Fisher is not the only professional athlete who upholds these views. Mike Singletary played in the NFL for 11 seasons and coached for nearly 10. Throughout his career as a player, Singletary also believed that it was his responsibility to God to play as hard as he could and make the most of the gift that God had given him. He acknowledged that the game was violent in nature and was something that most other Christians would not take part in, but stated that since it was his gift from God and God had a hand in creating the game, as long as there was never any malicious intent to harm and he played within the rules, God would support him. It was the violent nature of the sport that helped him build an even stronger relationship with God. He said that it was important to not only pray for his own strength and safety during games, but also for his opponents when they are injured or struggling to perform. Singletary does an excellent job of defining the difference between legitimate and illegitimate violence in sport. Organized sports tend to be a way for humans to express their naturally aggressive nature in a socially acceptable way.
The idea of sports being a socially acceptable way to express aggression is a key principle to the argument of mixed martial arts. The muscular male is an embodiment of Christian virtue and of the strong, assertive, breadwinning masculine ideal, to which evangelical men are encouraged to aspire. To muscular Christians, Christianity was beginning to seem too feminine for men to take part in, which was unacceptable because masculinization shapes men into responsible Christian husbands, fathers, and members. Fighters talk about what Jesus would do and being like Christ. Their behavior seems to help them embody religious principles. Danny White implied that through fighting, he has better understood Jesus' suffering and that hard work has made him a vessel for Christ. Fighters' restraint and control over aggression is compared to Jesus' great strength being constrained. Therefore, they are not only becoming a better person, but also becoming Christ-like. Hearing that Jesus didn't tap or Christ was not a quitter can give fighters strength for matches and everyday battles. Despite having a tattooed Bible verse, punching someone still does not mesh with the worldviews of many Christians. However, contemporary muscular Christians respond by suggesting manliness, self-control, and sports are indeed a route for virtue.
Although it is typically thought that there is a fundamental incompatibility between the value system of Christianity and the values that have been institutionalized in competitive sport, a Christian hockey league from Southern Ontario has proven that you can uphold these values in sport. This league is conducted in a way that centers around no body contact, no swearing, equal playing time, no beer in the locker rooms, community prayer before the games, and all of the teams make the playoffs. No standings are kept. These traits are what have caused these players to join the league. It offers them an alternative from reality. They get enough of the other atmosphere at work and want their leisure time to be spent uplifting God. This league shows that sport can be played while upholding traditional Christian values, but does this really showcase the rawness of sport that we love?
Violence has been a part of sport since its establishment in ancient times. Although Christians have a history of avoiding sports that contain violence, some Christians in today's world see it as an opportunity to use their gift provided to them by God. They don't see it as a harmful thing to do, but rather something that may strengthen their relationship with God. For muscular Christians, it goes beyond strengthening their relationship with God and helps them better understand their faith and embody Jesus in a more physical way. We believe that these claims are legitimate, and it is possible to participate in violent sports while maintaining faith. Athletes who play with faith can take part in violence in sport as long as their intention is to strengthen their relationship with God. Sport is not an excuse to use violence, but rather violence is part of the sport they choose to participate in, and they should not use sport to bend the rules of their religion. Based on the justifications made by religious athletes presented in this video, do you think it's possible to maintain a balance between faith and violence in sport?